My name is Laura Packer. I'm a storyteller, I'm a writer, I'm a stepmother, I'm a friend, I'm a daughter, I'm a partner, and I'm a cancer survivor. When I was 26 years old, I had no medical insurance, and I was working temp jobs. This was before Massachusetts Institute of Mass Health. I began having these funny problems with my vision in my left eye. I've noticed that if I looked up, my vision went away. And I thought, I don't have medical insurance. I need to pretend this isn't happening. So I pretended it wasn't happening for a month, and then 2 months, and 3 months, and then some friends came to visit me. They looked at me and they said, Laura, something's really wrong with you. Because although I hadn't noticed it, they could see that my left eye was starting to bulge out considerably more than my right eye. And I still didn't have medical insurance. So I was very lucky in that I got a job that had insurance. And the first thing I did as soon as I could afford it is I went to the doctor, and the doctor looked at me and made an assumption because I am a round woman. The doctor immediately said, well, you must have thyroid disease, because a common symptom of thyroid disease is to have one eye that bulges out more than the other. So they drew blood and they said, oh, it's not a big deal, you'll just take medication, but the blood tests all came back perfectly normal. So they sent me for a CT scan. And I still was thinking, this is nothing. This is just some kind of weird little abnormality, some kind of imbalance. I had the CT scan, and within 2 days of the CT scan, I got a call from the doctor saying, you have a mass behind your left eye. You need to go see a specialist. I was sent to a specialist at the Mass Eye and Ear Infirmary, and he showed me the films. He held them up on the wall, and I could very clearly see there was an eye on each side, but behind my left eye, there was another eye about the same size and shape right there. And there really shouldn't be a second eye behind your first. So he said, it's probably something benign, but it has to come out. And I said, well, can't you do a biopsy? And he said, no, it has to come out. I consider myself really fortunate because I got great medical care. Had this happened 10 years earlier, 20 years earlier, if I didn't have insurance, I may very well have lost my eye. As it was, I had great care. I had a fantastic surgeon. I had surgery within 2 weeks of them discovering there was a mass. And again, he said, it's probably nothing to worry about. But then I got that call 4 days later, and they said, we were wrong. You have something called hemangiopericytoma, which is a very rare cancer. It typically affects men over 40. It's more typically a brain cancer or a liver cancer or a stomach cancer. It's a cancer that grows in the epithelial cells, in the lining cells of capillaries that are near nerve tissue. So this grew in the capillaries that are near my optic nerve. And then there was a lot of back and forth because at the time, very little was known about hemangiopericytoma and if it was responsive to radiation or chemotherapy. My oncologist, I was 26 years old. Here I am saying my oncologist. My oncologist insisted you have to get radiation, you have to get radiotherapy. It's really important because they weren't able to get clean margins. Because had they gotten clean margins, had they taken more tissue than just the tumor, they would have taken out my eye. My surgeon said, if you have radiation therapy, you will go blind in that eye. And if you were my mother or my sister or my wife, I would tell you not to do it. And I trusted my surgeon. He and I had a great relationship, and I believed him. And I don't regret that. He saved my sight. He may have saved my life. Instead, now I get follow-ups every 2 years. Hemangiopericytoma has a pretty high rate of recurrence, so I'm not one of those people that can ever say I'm cured from cancer. I'm somebody who had cancer, who survived cancer, but I'm somebody who always needs to be vigilant. So every 2 years I go in and I get a scan. So far, it's been clean. But it was a hard journey because I didn't have all the drama around cancer. I had surgery. I had some anxiety-ridden months, and every couple of years I still get really anxious before I get the scans. But I had friends who had breast cancer. I had friends who had skin cancer. I had friends who had lung cancer. I had a friend who had glioblastoma who died from brain cancer. And they all had chemotherapy and radiation. They lost their hair. They suffered, and I didn't. So I didn't know if I could say that I was a cancer survivor. About 10 years, 8 years after my diagnosis, when I still said, oh yeah, I had a tumor and it was malignant, I couldn't say that I had cancer. A friend talked me into doing a charity event for fundraising for cancer, for cancer research. And it was a 2-day charity event, a 2-day bike ride. And I was terrified. I thought he was nuts. Why was he asking me to do this? I wasn't an athlete, but he said, you know this story. This is your story, and you'll love it. It'll be great. It'll be supportive. You'll be happy. You'll have fun. And so I decided that I would do this charity ride. I was so scared. I spent months training, months on the bike path that runs right here through Arlington and into Lexington and beyond, riding and training and training. And the whole time I was thinking, why am I doing this? I didn't really have cancer, did I? All right, so I'm helping other people. And then the ride came. I'd raised over $3,000 for one of our local cancer research institutions. And I started doing the ride. Just before we all set off on the morning of that ride, there was a speaker, and the speaker said, who here knows somebody who had cancer? And every single person raised their hand. And then the speaker said, who here has had cancer? Most people put their hands down. I left mine up. And all of these people, all of these strangers reached over and touched me, touched my shoulder, touched my head, patted me on the back and said, hey, we're really glad you're here. And I thought, maybe I did survive something. Everyone who was riding was covered in names of the people whom they knew, whom they loved, their neighbors, their friends, their family, people that they had lost, or people who were still fighting. I had names written on my legs. I had a piece of paper shoved into my pocket so all of these people could ride with me. And I set out on the ride. And the whole time that I'm pedaling, people were zooming past me because I wasn't a very strong or fast cyclist. And they kept saying, good job, you can do it. Hey, we're glad you're here, because I had this little button that said that I was a survivor. The first night, I slept so deeply, and then I woke up at 5 o'clock the next morning to set off on the ride. The sunrise was beautiful, and I was so cold. Gradually, my body warmed up as the world warmed up, and people kept riding past me. And after maybe 20 or 30 miles, the road turned, and there was a big hill that we all had to ride up, a really big hill. Now, anybody who rides a bike knows that hills are hard, and I'm struggling to get up this hill. I'm creeping up the hill at maybe 3 miles an hour, 4. It's a miracle I didn't just fall over. And I'm still thinking, why am I doing this? I mean, I'm raising money for a good cause, but is this who I am? And towards the top of the hill, this kid came riding right towards me. And I thought, kid, get out of my way. Can't you see I'm about to die here? Well, maybe I'm not about to die. But he came right towards me, and he had this huge grin, and I thought this was some kid making fun of me because I was going so slow. And he said, you're doing great. You beat cancer. You can beat this hill. And then he rode up the rest of the way with me. The whole ride was full of things like that. By the time I was done, I had changed from someone who was a person who had a tumor, and maybe it was a malignancy, maybe I'd had cancer. I was a cancer survivor. My story might be a little shorter and a little less dramatic, but it's no less meaningful. And now, when I have friends who are fighting, I have a friend right now who's fighting breast cancer and another who's fighting liver cancer. When I have friends who are fighting, I say to them, let's go for a ride. Let's go for a walk. Let's find some way to give meaning to this moment in our lives, to this fight that we are engaged in right now, so that we won't forget that who we are, the things we do, make a difference. The things you do make a difference. Whether you are a survivor, a friend of someone who survived, or whether you just want to have an impact in the world, every day, what we do, the stories we tell, the fights we survive, and the ones we don't, they all have an impact. Thank you.
If there's going to be a world with more birthdays, it'll start with the first step by you. Join Relay for Life in your hometown and help us celebrate, remember, and fight back. We're the American Cancer Society, the official sponsor of birthdays.